Is this thing recording? I see the flickering light. Oh, yep. Okay. Hello there, dearies. It's me, Margaret. You all know me by now, but I don't know all of you because my memory isn't too great, you know. Amber told me that I should make a video because she just bought me this nice sweater. It says, World's Greatest Grandma, because I am a grandma. Although I only remember one of my grandchildren, and that's you, Zachary. I hope you're doing well. Anyway, oh, is this still working? Oh, man. Technology now, it's so amazing. I don't know how to use it half the time. But I do know how to read a book. Amber told me I should read this for you, everyone. Excuse me, I had a little bit too much liquor earlier. It's called Fitty Shades. It says The Complete Trilogy by Samuel Jackson. I think I slept with him before. Oh, looks like we got some coupons in here. Oh, I'll show you the cover artwork too. And it says, for Allah. Looks like there's a picture of some weird creature holding an arm of some sort. It says, viewer discretion is advised. In tiny letters in the bottom corner there. I don't know if you can see that. Oh. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to read the whole thing. My voice is killing me. Says, Fitty Shades of Gray, motherfucker. As Ruth Becker turned the knob of the front door to her house, she felt a tingling sensation in the depths of her stomach fat, telling her that something wasn't right. Her first instinct upon entering the house was to turn on the light, and damn right she did. After looking around the room for a few moments, she finally realized what the cause of her upset stomach was. The 12 empty bottles of Jack Daniels on the floor. Oh, I have 12 empty bottles of Jack Daniels on my floor. Reminded her of how fucking wasted she had been, and that this was not her house after all. Oh, she must have been in my house. But she took a seat on the living room couch anyway. Before long, a young-looking boy, no older than 7 or 8, approached the drunken blob that was sprawled out on the sofa. What's your name, little fucker? Ruth asked. The boy continued to stare at her enormous rolls before answering, Owen, and fleeing into another room. He came back a few minutes later, holding the hand of a grown man in his 40s. I found a new mommy, Owen whispered to his father. Well, she's not as hot as Emily was before her murder, but I'll take whatever I can get, Darren Avery replied. As Darren took a couple steps closer to the couch, Ruth felt the sting of the alcohol force its way back through her esophagus and back out of her system. Darren looked at his pant leg to find that it was drenched in vomit. Well, I guess that means I need to take my pants off now, he said. A very good excuse. Ruth prepared to watch Darren strip as she slid her hand down the front of her slacks. Owen mimicked his father by taking off his pants too, thinking that it was some sort of game of follow the leader. Owen, if you're going to be naked, you at least need to make yourself useful and help make our new guest feel at home, Darren snapped. Go help Ruth take off her clothes. Owen quickly obeyed his father and began tugging at the bottom of Ruth's pant legs until they slid off. The pants, not the legs. Ruth then tried to take off her shirt, only to find her head stuck in the collar. Owen pulled to help get it off. Oh man, that was only the first page. I got a lot to go. I don't know if I can read this whole thing. Now what should I do, Daddy? Darren, who was now beating his own dick, commanded his son to put the winker in the wonker. Owen knew exactly what his father meant because they had watched several pornographic films together in what they called bonding time. It's been such a long time since someone has tickled my Elmo, Ruth stated. At this point in my life, size does not matter. I can really relate to that, it's true. Once you reach a certain age, it just doesn't matter. You'll take whatever dick you can get. Owen pressed his way in between Ruth's legs, and he put his winker in. He put his winker out. He put his winker in, and he shook it all about. He did the hokey pokey, and he turned himself around. That's what it was all about. As Darren watched his son do all the dirty work, he decided it was his turn to get a piece of the action. Pardon my manners, but I completely forgot to ask you if you wanted anything to drink, Darren asked Ruth. Surely enough, Ruth was a thirsty bitch. Okay, open wide, Darren said, and Ruth closed her eyes and dropped her jaw, waiting for her thirst to be quenched. Darren wrapped his right hand around Ruth's neck as he shoved his throbbing dick into her mouth. The less you can breathe, the less likely you will gag, Darren claimed, without any questioning of logic from Ruth. As she felt her head getting lighter from the lack of oxygen, Ruth muffled out a scream, hoping that Darren would release her throat from his grasp. Luckily, Darren was just about to reach his climax, in time for Ruth to catch a quick breath of air. Darren asked his son to escape from the grip of Ruth's thighs and grab his iPhone that was set on the coffee table. Are you ready for a surprise? Darren asked as he hastily stroked his cock. Keep your mouth open. Right as Darren was blowing his load into Ruth's mouth, he smacked the back of her head forward, forcing his cock into the very back of her throat. Ruth began to viciously cough as Darren's jizz seeped out of her nose. That's what I call an angry dragon, he said while Owen snapped a photo with his father's phone. Now that Darren had fulfilled his sexual needs, and Owen was too young to understand what sexual needs were, they both relaxed for a few minutes next to Ruth on the couch. Darren immediately oh, excuse me. Must have some jizz in my throat. They both relaxed for a few minutes next to Ruth on the couch. Darren immediately uploaded the picture of Ruth to Facebook to show all his friends. And Owen quickly fell asleep on his father's lap. Before Darren's heart rate could return to normal, Ruth began convulsing beside him until she fell off the couch and onto the floor. Startled, Owen woke up and hid behind his father's back as they watched in horror. They had never seen anyone flop around as violently as Ruth had been. It was as if she were a fish out of water, except she was the size of a whale. The word whale is bolded here. Give me the child, spoke a demonic voice coming from Ruth. Without hesitation, Darren grabbed his son from behind his back and pushed him toward the convulsing whale. At that moment, Ruth was suddenly lit in blazing flames as wings sprouted from her shoulder blades. You gave me an angry dragon. Now you shall see my true form, an angry dragon, the demon within Ruth said. Darren and Owen rushed to escape from their house, but found that all the exits were surrounded by fire. They looked up and saw Ruth spewing embers from her sagging dragon tits. Within minutes, the entire house was engulfed in the flames, and Darren and Owen both knew that neither of them would make it out alive. Son, I want you to reach your hand up into my asshole and pull out the gun I have hidden in there, Darren directed. Then, I want you to turn around so I can pull the bullets out of your asshole. Owen did as he was told, and soon they were in possession of a loaded weapon. Darren fired 3 bullets at Ruth, but none of them were effective. He handed the gun to Owen, who had never been taught how to shoot a gun before. Owen recklessly pulled the trigger as 2 more bullets came flying out, both into his father's chest. Oh my goodness! Struggling in pain. I'm gonna need a glass of water soon. Struggling in pain, Darren grabbed the gun from his son before the last bullet in his round of 6 was wasted. I'm sorry, but I have to do this to end my suffering, he said as he pressed the pistol against his left temple. Owen looked away until he heard the gunshot. He always knew that his father was a crazy motherfucker. Ruth continued to shoot flames from her tits as Owen wailed for help. There's nothing you can do now, my child. Your parents are both dead, and there is no way to escape, Ruth announced. Give in to my demands and let me devour you whole. Tears began to stream down Owen's face as he slowly paced toward the angry dragon. If there's one thing to be taught from all this, let it be known, Ruth said as she grabbed Owen by the nape of his neck. The mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Ruth tilted her head back, and in just one bite, Owen was down the hatch. As the house began to collapse into ashes, Ruth started to return to her human self, not remembering much of what had just happened due to the dangerously high amount of alcohol that was in her system. By the time the fire department had finally arrived, she realized it was already time for her to prepare to go to work. It was Monday morning, and she knew that her high school students would be disappointed if she had stayed home. The bell for her first period class rang as her students filled the room. How was your weekend? One student asked. Ruth looked at the student for a moment before answering. Fine. Just fine. It looks like that's the end of the first part. I'm gonna need to get some water before I continue reading. So, I'll give you all a chance to get your own water. You know, maybe go to the bathroom, have a little nookie. I don't know. But, we're gonna take a couple minutes of a break. I'm gonna leave the camera rolling because I don't know how to shut it off. myself a nice cup of water here. It's so hard for Margaret to drink because I might ruin my lipstick. Oh, I'll give you all a few more minutes to come back to your seats now. One more sip of water before I get going. Oh. The next part of the trilogy is called 50 Shades Darker, motherfucker. The student, who went by the name of Ryan, hesitantly took a seat at his desk and pulled a notebook out from the largest pouch of his backpack. Gently flipping through the pages before finding a blank one, he wrote his name and the date in the top right corner, ready to begin the morning assignment. All right, class, Ruth began. As a brainstorming activity, I want you all to start by writing down possible themes that can be found in the most recent book we finished reading. 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James. I read that one. Although Ryan never typically read any of the assigned books in his senior English class, this one was an exception. Every day after school, Ryan would rush home to the comfort and privacy of his bedroom, remove the novel from underneath his pillow, and carefully read each page with the sexual curiosity of a 9-year-old boy with his first Playboy magazine. While reading, he would imagine blindfolding Ruth and escorting her into his very own red room of pain. He would shove her against the back wall, remove the blindfold, and punch her in the face until she stripped herself of all her clothing. Not only did Ryan find pleasure in observing Ruth struggle to take off her clothes in the midst of her beatings, but Ruth also enjoyed the consequent soreness of the black eyes that Ryan would give her. Ryan, are you done with the brainstorming? Ruth asked, after everyone else's paper had already been collected. Ryan shook himself awake from the daydream that he had caught himself in the middle of and glanced down at his paper. Sketched all over the page were several heart shapes with RD plus RB inscribed within the borders. He immediately moved the notebook from off of his desk and over onto his lap, hiding both the brainstorming activity as well as his massive erection from Ruth. Need a water break. This reading is tough business. Where did I leave off? I haven't finished yet, Ryan uttered. Ruth peeked over his desk and pretended not to see the undeniable truth that was written on the sheet of notebook paper. Ryan was hot as a motherfucker for Ruth, and Ruth knew it. Can I see you after class? Ruth questioned, and Ryan anxiously nodded his head yes. For the next hour of class, Ryan found himself slipping back into his daydream. Ruth was now completely naked with a Granny Smith apple lodged in her mouth and her arms and legs tightly knotted together with rope. Ever since Ryan had been hog-tied and gagged with an apple as an attempt to make a pornographic film, he'd always wanted to use a similar approach on someone else. That someone was Ruth. As he slowly paced toward the branding iron that was suspended from a hook on the wall, Ruth began to softly whimper through the apple clamped in her jaw. Yeah, that's right, Ryan exclaimed while grabbing the iron off the wall. I want you to squeal just like a pig. Ruth began to tremble while letting out several louder but still muffled screams as Ryan placed the end of the pole into the hot flames of the mantle that had conveniently been in his red room of pain. Once the iron was of a bright red saturation, he removed it from the fireplace and started to approach his subject. By then, Ruth had been desperately trying to escape from the ropes that were beginning to cut off her circulation. Before she had the chance to loosen the knot, Ryan gave her another blow to the face to teach her a lesson. He then grabbed her enormous left ass cheek and thrusted the piping iron onto its surface, leaving the outline of an image that resembled Bin Laden to forever be stamped on her cellulite-loaded skin. Ruth gasped in extreme pain as the apple fell out of her mouth and onto the floor. "Let me go," she begged. But Ryan whacked her over the back with the pole before she could say anything more. Need another sip of water. Oh, I'll let you go all right. But you better run, or I'll be hitting you again, he replied while unfastening the tied rope. Right as Ruth was about to be set free, Ryan aggressively waved the branding iron above his head and let out a yee-haw! The rope hit the floor, and Ruth tried to stand up, only to be struck over her back again. Don't you be trying to stand on your feet, my chunky swine. I want you on your hands and knees, and you better get running. Run, piggy, run, Ryan shouted. Immediately, Ruth did as she was told and began to scurry around the room like a raging boar. Oh, these pages are so thick. Yes, very good, my pig, Ryan asserted. Now you stay right in this room while I leave for a moment to get some lubrication. Locking the door behind him, Brian made his way into the kitchen and opened the refrigerator. On the very bottom shelf was a hefty bucket filled with at least 30 unwrapped sticks of butter. He crouched to his knees to lift up the bucket and returned to his red room of pain with it. Upon reopening the door to the room, Ruth had still been squealing and running around on all fours. It's feeding time, Ryan exclaimed while dumping the sticks of butter all over the floor. Enthusiastically, Ruth began to roll her rolls around in order to coat herself with it entirely, and Ryan swiftly started to take off his clothes, revealing the mangina between his legs. Get over here, piggy, he added, and Ruth scampered over to him, her arms slipping and throwing off her balance with each subtle movement. Without being told what to do next, Ruth took the initiative and began to lightly nibble on Ryan's mangina, transferring some butter from the edge of her mouth onto it. Ryan softly moaned and began to fondle Ruth's lauded tits. I sure do love the feeling of butter between my thighs, Ryan mentioned. Go fetch me that apple, piggy. Ruth slid racing across the hardwood floor to find and bring back the apple that had previously been stuffed in her mouth. Good piggy, Ryan praised while gently taking the apple from Ruth's teeth. Ruth took a couple steps back as Ryan began to twist the apple up into his mangina. The butter provided just enough lubrication for the apple to squeeze through, but not enough for it to slide back out. He waddled over to the fireplace and opened his legs so that they were positioned toward the burning embers. Now we wait, he said, with a slightly confused look from Ruth. Roughly 15 minutes passed before Ryan started to sit up. Get over here, he beckoned her. I want you to catch the apple when it falls out. Ryan struggled to slowly stand on his 2 feet, while Ruth prepared to lay on her back with her jaw open directly underneath Ryan's mangina. He gave it a push, as though he was giving birth. The apple popped out, roasted to a light brown crisp, and fell right into Ruth's mouth. Wait, there's more, he added before giving Ruth the chance to remove the hot apple. Ryan forced another push, as all of his bowels were at once released from his asshole and onto Ruth's face. Yeah, now you're a filthy piggy, aren't you? Through a small opening in the heap of shit that was covering her eyes, Ruth caught sight of something else beginning to hang from in between Ryan's legs. Once again squealing through her apple-lodged muzzle, her eyes grew wider in terror. Ryan's walls were falling out! Relax, piggy, he started. This is all part of the recipe. Right as Ryan's prolapse was about to be taken by Ruth's gravity, he was alarmed by the sound of the school bell, signifying that class was now over. In panic, he glanced around the room and observed everyone packing up the school supplies and rushing out the door. Ryan, before you leave, remember, I wanted to talk to you, Ruth commented. Yes, Miss Becker, what is it? He replied once everyone else had left. Close the door, she said, and Ryan sprinted up and out of his seat to do so. I just wanted to ask you if you would be interested in coming to my house for dinner tonight. My husband will be away and I don't want to eat alone. Taken by surprise, Ryan formulated a devilish smile as his eyes met his teacher's. I will be making my favorite dessert, baked apple dumplings. What do you say? Of course, Mrs. Becker. I would love to. Oh, dear. Please call me Ruth. Why, yes, Ruth. Baked apple dumplings it is. Oh, it appears that's the end of the second part of the trilogy. We got some pictures in here. I don't know how well you guys can see this, but on this page, it looks like a baked apple dumpling. And on this page, we got some sticks of butter. I'm gonna take another couple-minute break before I read the final part of the trilogy, because this is the longest part. And it's also tiring to read so much, you know? My eyes are so tired. My glasses ain't strong enough for this. So, I'll be back in a couple minutes. Oh, we've been doing this for a while now. the old vocal cords, you know. Ugh. Okay. Got myself some more water. I think my lipstick's still doing okay, so that's good. Oh. Okay. On to the final part of the story. 50 Shades Freed, motherfucker. That evening, Ryan made sure to finish all of his homework right away, because in doing so, he knew Ruth would be turned on by his proactivity. He had never been asked out by an older woman before, or any woman actually, and he had a gut feeling that tonight would be the night. Ryan wanted to prove to Ruth that he could fuck her more good than her husband or any other man could. He anxiously fingered through the clothes hanging up in his closet and immediately decided on wearing the same tuxedo he had worn at his junior prom the year prior. Ryan had been a chaperone. Oh, excuse me. Have a burp coming up. Ryan had been a chaperone at the dance, and Ryan had recalled an instance when he caught Ruth checking him out. Once Ryan had changed back into his black tux and secured his seafoam green necktie in a half-windsor knot, he hurriedly sprayed himself with his favorite scented colon and headed into the kitchen. While he was opening the refrigerator door to grab the tub of I Can't Believe It's Not Butter, his mother had stopped him in his tracks. "Where are you going, dressed up all like that and smelling just like your father's colon?" she asked. Blushing, Ryan responded, "I have a date with someone very special to me." He closed the refrigerator door. Excitedly, Ryan's mother rushed to look for some condoms in the medicine cabinet of the bathroom. However, she failed to find any. "Wait right here," she instructed Ryan while looking through the kitchen cabinets. "Hurry up, Mom, I need to leave soon." "Here, I found something. Take these," she said while handing Ryan a couple plastic sandwich baggies. "I want you to be safe tonight on your date. My little boy is growing up to be a big man." A tear rolled down her face as she hugged her son tightly. "Thanks, Mom. I'll be safe. Goodbye," Ryan replied while walking out the front door and to his car, holding the tub of I Can't Believe It's Not Butter and the sandwich bags. His mother stood in the doorway and watched him until he started to drive away. As Ryan pulled into Ruth's driveway, he noticed 4 other vehicles taking up its vacancy. One of them, he presumed, was Ruth's. However, he could think of no explanation for the presence of the other 3. He nervously walked up to the door and rang the bell, the tub of I Can't Believe It's Not Butter cradled in his arms and the sandwich bag stuffed in his left back pocket. Shortly after, Ruth hobbled over to the open door and let him come inside. "Ryan, I'm so glad you could make it. We've all been waiting for you to get here," Ruth said. Ryan was confused about what Ruth meant by we. He was under the impression that it was just going to be a nice dinner date between the 2 of them. Nevertheless, he handed Ruth the tub of I Can't Believe It's Not Butter, and she welcomed him in. "I thought about bringing flowers, but then I thought you could get a lot more use out of the I Can't Believe It's Not Butter," Ryan admitted. "That's so thoughtful of you," Ruth responded while leading Ryan to the kitchen. She placed the I Can't Believe It's Not Butter inside her refrigerator next to the carton of Tenga Dick eggs. "Come this way into my dining room. Everyone is waiting." To Ryan's horror, seated around the dining room table were 3 other students he recognized from school. Their calves tied to the legs of the chairs and their torsos tied to the backs. Their arms were free, but none of them seemed to be smart or concerned enough to try and unbind themselves. They were each wearing blue denim overalls and perfectly rounded goggles over their eyes. Need a water break. That's good water. Greetings! One of them exclaimed. Ryan could tell by his voice that he was none other than the great comic book artist, Justin Williams. Next to Justin was a boy clapping his hands over his head. Ryan identified him as one of his best friend's retarded twin brother, Kyle Martin. Taking up the entire other side of the table was a large black woman. Ryan recognized her by the size of her gunt. It was Lena Dutt. Now that you're all finally here, Ruth started. You can put this on. She held up a crocheted men's thong in the shape of a one-eyed minion. This was not the kind of fantasy Ryan had in mind, but he changed into the minion thong anyway, in hopes of pleasing Ruth. Ruth pulled out a chair in between Justin and Kyle for Ryan to sit in, and then began securing his legs and torso to it so to prevent his escape while dining. As Ruth tied the rope around his calves, Ryan could not help but pop a boner. "Hello, little guy," Ruth greeted the minion as it began to stand up in Ryan's lap. Once he was all strapped in, she proceeded to go into the kitchen and grab the prepared food for dinner. Meanwhile, Justin began ranting to Lena about his latest comic book characters. Lena appeared to be in a trance. Her eyes rolled to the back of her head and a dribble of spit rolling down her numerous double chins. Kyle Martin continued to clap his hands over his head. Ryan glanced over, and Kyle immediately froze and stared blankly back at him. "Knock, knock!" Kyle cried out. He began to aggressively smack his forehead with his right hand, and then extended it over to Ryan's forehead to do the same to his. "Knock, knock!" "Who's there?" Ryan hesitated to ask. Right as Ruth walked back into the room, Kyle exclaimed, "Banana!" and began to frantically wave his arms around. Ruth was carrying a plate of bananas and then set it on the table. "Bananas!" The three minions chimed simultaneously, gazing wide-eyed at the food before them. Ryan watched them, confused as to what was going on and why they had been invited to Ruth's house in the first place. He watched them fight over the fruit like animals. Kyle managed to snatch 2 bananas, one in each hand, and continued to clap his arms over his head much like before. Justin and Lena had both gone after the same banana and were engaged in an across-the-table tug-of-war match over it. They resembled a couple of rowdy chimps, only Lena looked more like a gorilla. Might as well take a water break. Ruth left the room again to fetch more food. She came out moments later with 2 microwave loaves of bread and the tub of I can't believe it's not butter that Ryan had given her. Lena had seized control over the banana she had been wrangling over and ate it in one bite without even removing the peel first. Justin simply reached for a different banana to feed himself. Upon seeing the loaves of bread, Kyle instantly dropped both of his bananas onto the floor, unable to pick them back up due to being tied to the chair. "Eat up, my minions," Ruth instructed. "We've got a job to take care of after dinner." "I don't really like bananas," Ryan softly said to Ruth. He had, for the most part, lost his appetite from the discomfort he had felt sitting at the table with 3 brainwashed minions. He looked down at his own little minion, but by then it had been limp and rather lifeless. That's all right, Ruth assured. You can eat bread. As Ryan reached for a knife and the I can't believe it's not butter, he saw, from the corner of his eye, a tisket-a-tasket, Kyle Martin, fucking a microwave loaf of bread! Kyle had undone the zipper to his overalls and had weaved his dick through the opening. His arms were now extended in front of him, holding the bread and rapidly forcing it up and down onto his wiener. Knock, knock, Kyle screeched. Knock, knock! Knock, knock! Across the table, Lena had consumed the other loaf of bread entirely by herself. Now what am I supposed to eat? Ryan questioned. Don't you worry, Ryan. The baked apple dumplings I promised you are baking in the oven right now, Ruth replied. Ryan decided to patiently wait for his dessert and tried to kill time by bringing his minion back to life. He fondled it gently in his hands while chatting with Ruth. So, what is this job we have to take care of after we eat? He asked, hoping it would be a task for his minion to complete. We're going to take a trip down to Darren Avery's house. I need you 4 students to help me with something, Ruth explained. Last night, I made the terrible mistake of drinking a little too much. I can't really remember most of what happened, but it has all been starting to come back to me. I made an unexpected visit to Darren's home, had an orgy with him and his oldest son, Owen, and then transformed into a horrible fire-breathing creature. Darren shot himself because of me, and then I swallowed Owen while their house was lit in flames. I escaped before the fire department showed up. Ryan's jaw dropped in absolute shock from the words coming out of his English teacher's mouth. The 3 others had not been paying attention. Kyle was still fucking his bread. Justin had been talking to himself. And Lena once again appeared to be in a trance. But what are we supposed to help you with? Ryan asked, perplexed. He had wondered why his quiet teacher had not been at school that day, and now he had the answer. Still, he did not understand why Ruth needed him and the other students, or why they had been dressed as minions. You see, Ruth continued, I read about it all in today's newspaper. After the fire department put out the flames, they did not find any bodies around. This means that Darren's body must have disintegrated completely to ashes before they had the chance to find him. I can feel Owen's angry soul growing inside of me now. And unless I bring his father back to life, there's no telling what will become of me. I must use black magic to revive Darren and set Owen's soul free from my body. Ryan, still incredibly puzzled, sat in silence for a few minutes to take everything in. But how are we supposed to help you with that? He asked once again. Listen carefully, Ryan, Ruth began. Bringing someone back to life is no easy task. I have read many books about it and can tell you that it takes a lot of spiritual energy to make it possible. And there are many steps that need to be precisely followed. First of all, black magic works best when at least one Negro person is present. That's why I invited Lena Dutt. Next, there needs to be a picture of the person being resurrected. I invited Justin Williams because he is the best artist in the entire school and can draw an exact portrait of Darren to be used. The Martin boy will serve as the sacrifice. He shall hold the drawing of Darren while I use a razor blade to slice open his neck. And you, Ryan, you have the most important role in this ritual. Why me? You were Darren's favorite student, You may not have realized it, but Darren loved you. He loved you like he loved no other student. And that, you see, is the number one thing we need in order to bring him back to life. Love. At that moment, the oven's timer went off. Ruth stood up from her chair to go and get the finished baked apple dumplings. Dig in, she ordered, and her minions obeyed. Even Ryan, who was not dressed in complete minion attire, had his share of the dessert. He realized that he probably wouldn't be getting any action tonight, and so he might as well enjoy his dumplings, with or without any hot cum. By 8 o'clock, everyone had finished eating. Ruth hastily unlaced each minion from the ropes that binded them to their chairs. Ryan untied himself and loaded everyone into her minion mobile. Ryan rode shotgun, still mostly nude. His minion had been perked up in his lap for the entire ride, enjoying the thrill of being kidnapped by Ruth. "All right, we're here," Ruth announced. She and Ryan got out of the minion mobile and opened the back doors to help the others out. Lena had been squeezed in between Justin and Kyle in the back seat. Justin had gone out of the driver's side and Kyle on the passenger side. But when Lena tried to follow suit and get out from the passenger side, she became lodged stuck in the door space. This is where it's going to get good. "Everybody help push," Ryan demanded. He climbed into the back seat and began to exert all his strength onto the left side of her body. Justin then pushed on Ryan's body and Ruth onto Justin's. Kyle stood outside of the vehicle, clapping his hands over his head. Nevertheless, Lena eventually popped through the door and onto the ground. "Okay, everybody, let's get down to business," Ruth said. Where the house of Darren Avery once stood just the day before, now was just an acre of collapsed walls and soot. But somewhere in the remains were the ashes of Darren's body, which was all Justin would need to see in order to draw up an accurate enough portrait. First, Ruth traced the large pentagram in the center of where the house once stood. She then handed Justin a piece of notebook paper and a black crayon. She didn't need to tell him what to do. Within minutes, Justin had drawn a photorealistic representation of the quiet teacher. Ruth took the paper from him and then gave it to Kyle for him to hold on to. "Okay, now everyone look away," she requested as she pulled a switchblade from her handbag. She took Kyle's arm and led him to the center of the pentagram, while raising her left hand and holding the blade against Kyle's neck with her right. She stated, "I defy Jesus Christ," and proceeded to slice open Kyle's jugular. "Knock, knock!" he screamed. Those were his last words. Kyle's body fell to the ground, and emerging from the ashes was Darren Avery, in the same naked state that he had been in at the time of his death. "Happy birthday!" Darren proclaimed. At that very moment, a faint whimpering noise was heard from somewhere within Ruth. She quickly removed her pants and G-string, and Darren, Lena, Justin, and Ryan all watched as Owen's soul escaped from her asshole. "I'm free!" Owen shrieked as his opaque, ghostly body drifted to the sky. "Goodbye, son," Darren said. Now that Owen's soul was set free from Ruth's body, everyone could return to living their normal lives. But first, Kyle's body needed to be disposed of. Darren took the overalls off of Kyle's limp body and put them on himself so that he was no longer bare. He then carried the body over to the Minion Mobile and placed it in the trunk. "Everybody get in," Ruth demanded. This time, Justin rode shotgun. Ryan sat in the back seat in between Darren and Lena. They were headed to the nearest cemetery where the legendary Mung Ho and his/her daughter, Lily Shee, would take Kyle's body off of their hands for them. Mung Ho was practically an urban legend. Nobody knew whether he/she was male or female, where he/she came from, or whether or not Lily was even his/her daughter. Most people had heard tales about Mung Ho, but only few had ever seen him/her. It was believed that Lily Shee was the only person who had ever heard Mung Ho's voice, and that is why many believed her to be Mung Ho's daughter. Regardless, those who were familiar with Mung Ho's legend knew that he/she had a particular fondness for dead bodies and would gladly dispose of them in such a manner as to hide any evidence of manslaughter or murder. Again, nobody really knew what Mung Ho did with the dead bodies, but Lily seemed to have a close connection with him/her and served as a messenger between Mung Ho and the outside world. Lily could be found on most nights wandering around the cemetery, negotiating with those who had bodies to dispose of. "Are we there yet?" Justin asked, his voice high-pitched and nasally. "Almost," Ruth replied. In the back seat, Darren asked Ryan if he would like to play Fire Truck, my favorite game. Ryan agreed, not only knowing what the game was. Darren gently placed his hand on Ryan's left knee and began to slowly caress his way up toward his minion. Ryan enjoyed the sensation and did not ask Darren to stop. As the minion began to rise, Darren pet the top of its head until it started to become moist. The vehicle then came to a sudden stop. "Okay, we're here," Ruth declared. Once again, Lena needed to be pushed out of the Minion Mobile. "Oh, hurrah, everyone!" Lily Shee exclaimed while approaching the vehicle. Her eyes were squinted and puffy, a toothy grin on her face. Her teeth were yellow, and bits and pieces of pork fried rice appeared to line her gums. "Greetings!" Justin replied. "You here for Mung Ho?" "Yes, we are," Ruth whispered in an ASMR fashion into Lily's ear. "Can you take a body for us?" "Oh, of course. Mung Ho be very pleased. Where a body I take." Ruth opened the trunk of the Minion Mobile and discreetly handed it over to Lily. Thank you, Lily said, and began dragging Kyle's body behind her off into the dark depths of the wooded cemetery. Pressure doing business. As they watched Lily walk away with Kyle's dead body, an overwhelming feeling of accomplishment came upon them. "We did it, everyone," Ruth praised. "Now, let's get you all back home." Ruth closed the door of the trunk and hobbled over to the driver's seat. Before she got in, she could have sworn, somewhere far off in the distance, she could hear Mung Ho's voice squealing in tremendous gratitude. And that's it, folks. We have some artwork on the back of the book here. It looks like this would be some sort of representation of what Mung Ho would look like. Although, as we learned in the story, nobody really knows what he/she looks like. So that was just a guess. I'm gonna take one last drink of water before I let you guys go. Wow! I've been doing this for almost an hour! Wow! Oh! Anyway, it's getting to be past my bedtime. I'm gonna need to go to bed soon, but I hope you enjoyed the story. And if you want your own copy, you can let Amber know, and she can send you the link, and you can buy your own. Anyway, it's good to communicate with you all. I can't see you. Can't really see nothing with these glasses, you know. But yeah, I don't really know how to stop this. I'm just gonna press buttons until it ends. Have a good night, everybody.